Literacy is dead. At least that's what a lot of people are saying. We don't think it's true. We do, however, think literacy is about to look different, a lot different. For many people, the words "the end" signify either satisfaction or sorrow. What happens after the end? How do words become catalysts for progress and advancement?
Join us today for the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. Hi, I'm Amy Boland, literacy specialist, writer, and college instructor.
And I'm Holland Webb, a full-time writer and editor. And this is the Afterword.
Holland, we're back, and I'm so excited about this topic, the Afterword on literary accessibility of libraries. And I just have this memory. When I was a little girl going to the library with my mom, it was absolutely magical. There were so many choices of books, and the librarians during story time introduced me to new worlds, helped my imagination grow in new directions. And then getting my first library card, I actually had something that made me feel so grown up. And so for me, libraries and books have always brought me joy.
Well, my favorite memory of a library isn't actually mine. Right after World War II, a lot of rural counties around the country got bookmobiles to take the books from the central library out, particularly, where there were inaccessible places, so that the kids all over the county would have books. And my great aunt drove the first bookmobile in Kentucky. So she died about 10 years ago when she was 97. But my memory is every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every holiday, she had 3 stories. When I lived in New York City, when I went to Europe, and when I drove the bookmobile, because she loved having gone out to those kids that never saw anything outside of super rural Kentucky and people they were related to, and she gave them books that opened the whole world for them.
That's amazing. And that just is such an important thing. Libraries are vital. In a recent Pew survey, 2/3 of Americans said their community would suffer a major impact if the local library closed. The responses of the survey indicated that libraries are viewed as safe spaces and provide educational learning for all ages. They are considered third places like a Starbucks or a cafe.
Benjamin Franklin opened the first lending library in 1731. And since then, people have gravitated toward physical buildings, real books. But many libraries today are closing, and there seems to be a decline in membership. Recently, the British writer Caitlin Moran wrote this: "A library in the middle of a community is a cross between an emergency exit, a life raft, and a festival. They are cathedrals of the mind, hospitals of the soul, theme parks of the imagination."
But come on, Holland, let's be realistic. Who has time to read anymore? I mean, we're flooded with information at a ridiculous rate. It's to a point where we need additional hard drives in our brains to sort, read, and digest new books.
Agreed. And there's a trend that's surfacing called the short read. This is literature that suits folks who are limited on time but want to read. And while some people are advocating the closing of libraries, most of the public disagrees. For example, Forbes magazine published a controversial op-ed which argued that libraries are a waste of taxpayer money and should be replaced by Amazon stores. And they had to take the article down after readers protested.
And actually, books are really, truly getting longer, and new books are hitting the shelves daily. Many of us need help navigating the question of how libraries fit into the digital age. And to do that, we've asked Melinda Long and Stacey Gardner to assist us. Stacey is a public school librarian. She's been working with children, parents, teachers, and administrators for 10 years. Stacey has also worked in public libraries, academic libraries, as well as rare and special collection libraries. So Stacey, welcome to the Afterword, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Amy and Hon. I'm so glad to be here. Really, I consider myself an avid reader and a library lover. I've felt like that my entire life. I'm also a wife and a mom to young children, and I happen to love all things in the ways of office supplies. I have been working in libraries for what seems like ages, and I've been hanging out in libraries even longer. For as long as I can remember, I have just loved libraries, and that's all I ever wanted to be was a librarian. So I got a couple funny looks growing up, but honestly, that's how I view myself.
Thank you.
That is so cool. Our other guest is two-time #1 New York Times best-selling author, an award-winning author of How I Became a Pirate, Pirates Don't Change Diapers, The 12 Days of Christmas in South Carolina When Papa Snores, And her newest release, Art Smart Science Detective, just hit the stores. Melinda Long, tell us a little about you.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Holland. Amy, I am so excited about being here. I love libraries too. I have always had this love thing going with libraries since I was tiny. And I've been writing for a long time. And of course, naturally, that just sort of fits together. And I've always been a lifelong reader. I also like to do a little acting and that kind of thing. I'm a mother of 2 adult children. And I'm going to be a grandma in June. I'm real excited about that.
Congratulations.
But we're here about libraries. And that's what I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, awesome.
So tell us one of your earliest memories at the library, Melinda.
You know, I can remember going into the library with my mother in Spartanburg when I was really little and just taking home this whole bundle of books. But the one thing that I remember most, I can remember when we lived in Tennessee for about 6 months, and my best friend was the library there. And I can remember going into the library and pulling out a copy of Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time. And it's like I couldn't wait to get out to the car. Everybody else was still in the library, and I'm going, no, I'm going to the car because I wanted to open the book and read by myself. And I was just so thrilled to be able to do that. And I was one of those bookmobile kids, Holland. I was. It came to our neighborhood when we lived in Greenville when I was like 3rd or 4th grade. I can remember going out to the bookmobile, and that was the highlight of my month. I mean, I would love going out there. It was just cool.
What about you, Stacey? What's one of your earliest memories at the library?
What I really remember is when I was in elementary school, I was in Oconee County at one of the elementary schools, Pine Street Elementary, which is actually now become the district office there. But I remember our librarian, Mrs. Max, and every time we went, she would have just some amazing stories that she would read to us. And I just remember getting sucked in. I was absolutely enthralled. I remember books like Jumanji. I remember when she read us a chapter book, Snot Stew. And I just remember how much fun it was, how much I loved being there. We were all there together, just enjoying the story. And it was such a magical moment. That's my earliest memories. I remember a lot going to the Oconee County Public Library as a kid and just walking through the rows and rows of books. And we took a field trip there. I think I must have been in 5th grade or maybe in middle school. But I remember seeing the massive card catalog and just everything being there. So many choices. I kind of remember a little bit of dust, the smell of paper, and magic.
Oh, that's exciting. So, Melinda, I'm going to shift this question to you. What have you observed in your career personally as an author when your book is out there and can be checked out at the library?
It does make a difference because kids are exposed to books through several sources, their parents, their teachers, and through librarians and through libraries themselves. And librarians, both county librarians and school librarians, are really good about recommending books to kids. And if they recommend the book to the kid and the kid likes the book, then chances are they're going to ask for other books by that author or something like that book. And they might eventually go out and ask parents to buy the book, which is good for me. But I think it really does make a difference. It has in my experience anyway.
How about you, Stacey? What have you observed as the person who is the promoter, the one who gives the exposure? What have you observed in the shifts of those authors who have had their books available at the library?
Honestly, it just takes 1 or 2 kids or 1 or 2 teachers or a really good book review that somebody does on TV to really spark this big need and push for that author. I remember for the first time, Kate DiCamillo. I didn't know her very well, but then someone recommended her books to me, and it just took off. But I see it with kids a lot. Someone will hear something, they'll read something by a new author, and then all of a sudden that author is everywhere. And when the books are available at the library, it makes it accessible so that these new authors get exposure and people that just come to look forward to their new books being published, just like Melinda said. If one person enjoys it and then the next student reads it, all of a sudden you've got this big snowball of people wanting to read your literature, and it provides an audience for the author.
That is so true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You teach budding writers,
Right.
Melinda. What would you say to new writers about, how important it is to get your book into a library? Because I don't think that's what people think about. I think people think about, I want to see my book at Barnes and Noble.
Right, right. But I think it's equally important, or even more so, to get it into a library, because that's where people go to get their first exposure of a lot of books. I mean, I love to go to Barnes and Noble, to private bookstores, Fiction Addiction down here, but I like to go to different bookstores and browse, but I like to go into a library and browse. And I'm going to go up to the librarian and say, hey, what you got that's like this, or something that I've enjoyed before, and I'm going to get them to recommend something. And to me, that's very important. So if your book is in a library, chances are you're going to get a lot of that oomph.
Stacey, you mentioned the word accessible. What are some of the qualities that draw you to a book that you would recommend?
Honestly, you need good cover art. I know that I'm not supposed to say that as a librarian. You're never supposed to judge books by its cover, but some good cover art does help to kind of draw the reader to the book, especially if it's on a display. And I think that a good, intriguing title can draw kids in and they want to read more, maybe flip over the back, read the synopsis. I know a lot of kids that tend to stick to the same author once they find an author they love. Let's say it's someone in the realistic fiction genre. Once they read all the books by that author, then I find them asking either their peers or me some other books that are in that same genre so they can try a new author. And then I think a really good book review. I just remember reading Rainbow as a child, and LeVar Burton could sell any book, and I would read anything he would recommend. And I feel like that's still true. And that can be the recommendation by a teacher. When authors come to visit, you usually see a big spark in reading what they've presented. I know that when Melinda Long's actually come to my previous school, everyone wanted her books. They wanted to read more and more. So I think that good cover art, a good title, and a good book review.
What do you think, Melinda?
Yeah, I mean, she's completely right. Stacey, you're right. Kids gravitate to a good cover. Adults gravitate to a good cover. I mean, and the thing is that I love an intriguing title. And titles are hard to come by if you're an author. It's hard to come up with a really good title that's going to grasp the reader's attention without giving stuff away. And that's what you go for, And you're right about the book reviews. I think it's really important. Now people go to Goodreads and to Amazon reviews and a lot of other reviews. But if you've got a good review, people will follow that. Personally, as far as when I'm looking for something, I look for those things. I also look for the tag of mystery, suspense, adventure for me, maybe a little romance. I like a good series. I like to grab hold of a series and get involved with the characters because it's all about characterization for me. But the first thing you see is the title or the book cover.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get in this book cover route just a little bit further? And I ask this because we have a couple of different episodes that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks that I think are going to touch on this. We're going to be talking about how stories cross borders. And I know that one of our guests for that, because I've heard her say this, talks about how book covers can be welcoming or they can be barriers based on whether or not you see yourself or anyone who looks like you on that book cover. And is that something that you would want to speak to, Stacey?
Absolutely, Holland. I do think that that's true. And I think that people are noticing that more and more. I think it's always been a factor in literacy, but people are now drawn to that. I work with a variety of students from a variety of backgrounds, and it is true. They want to see themselves in the books that they're reading. They don't just want to read stories that have animals for characters. They don't just want to read something in the fantasy series where, everyone's a butterfly or something. They want to see themselves. And if they look around the library or they look around a bookstore and nobody looks like them, nobody talks like them, nobody has a family like them, I think you can feel a little bit excluded. And I feel like libraries and authors and publishers are doing a really good job of understanding that it's really about everyone, and they're providing more materials and more diverse backgrounds, but in a authentic kind of way. You can't just put a picture on the cover and not have any other meat to it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but people just need to feel understood. They need to be connected. And I think that you can lose that if your cover isn't broad enough to appeal to lots of different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Hmm.
Did you want to say anything to that, Melinda? Or?
Well, I mean, I think that the cover and the content echo each other naturally. I mean, they should. And what you're saying about the cover, Stacey, is exactly right. People look for things that look like themselves. They look for content in the book for characters that look like themselves just the same way. And one of the things that we teach when we're teaching writing to adults is make your characters reflect people that want to see themselves. They want to see their own qualities in characters. That's what draws you to a character, is seeing yourself in it. So I think it works as well for the cover.
Well, that's part of accessibility too, isn't it? It's not just can a person have access to a book, but do they want access to that book, right? It's not just is it available, but is it desirable? And yeah, I mean, you go into that library and everybody can go to the library, right? It is a much broader community than you might find in a bookstore.
Exactly.
And certainly then you're going to find if it's just you surfing Amazon.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the idea of a library being a third space is so powerful, because we talked about this in a previous episode, the idea of having windows and mirrors. So we need a window to see the world, but we also want a mirror to have things reflected in our own selves. And so, Stacey, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about some of the favorite books you read when you were a child.
Oh, Amy, I have such good stories. I'll try to limit them. That's really why I wanted to become a librarian in the first place, because I had so many positive experiences with reading as a child. I've already mentioned Mrs. Max, my elementary school librarian. She's going to come up again. She was just that wonderful. But I remember I was in fourth grade. I had always enjoyed reading, but it wasn't something that I spent vast quantities of time doing. But Mrs. Max that year, I asked her, I kind of like ghost stories and mysteries. Do you have anything for me? And she said, yes. And she took me over. I remember it was a Friday, and she got a book out for me. It was called A Doll in the Garden. It's by Mary Downing Hahn. And she sent it with me, and I read it over the weekend, and I really couldn't put it down. And that's the first time that I really remember that happening. And it was just such a quick read for me. And I was just so in the characters' lives that I just couldn't put it down. And I went back on Monday morning and I said, Miss Max, I love this book. Do you have anything else? And of course, as any good librarian, of course I do. And she gave me my all-time favorite book. I am an adult now, but my favorite book is still a book called Wait Till Helen Comes, also by Mary Downing Hahn. I took that book home and I almost missed the bus stop because I was reading on the bus and I was so into the book, I didn't even realize it was time for me to get off. It was just a magical experience. I read a lot of series. I was also a series girl. Babysitter's Club. I read The Boxcar Children. I went through a big fantasy stage. Susan Cooper wrote lots of dragon books that I really enjoyed in middle school.
Wow, that's a lot of good stuff right there. I think one of the takeaways that I'm hearing from you is this connection to the positive social emotional element that story can bring. And I think that's powerful in what an author does in their work, in their craft, but also the opportunity to raise up maybe the experience of a person who's reading, to give them that connection and give them that little bit of magic. What about you, Melinda? What were some of your favorite books?
Oh, man, the Narnia series. I love the Narnia series. I was crazy about that. C.S. Lewis, A Wrinkle in Time, of course. I was Meg. I mean, I really was. And as far as when I was really little, Green Eggs and Ham, Where the Wild Things Are. And of course, we're from different generations, Stacey. And I can remember the books you're talking about because I was teaching some of those books. These other books were so important to me. I really can remember escaping into them. And I, too, actually missed the bus stop reading one day. They had to actually get somebody to walk me back to my stop. I can remember that.
Wow, that's talking about putting your nose in a good book.
Yeah.
So what is the essential piece of information we need to understand how libraries affect who reads and what they read and what kinds of books the American public consumes? Stacey?
Well, I think as far as who reads, you really have to understand, and I think people do know, but libraries are for all people of all ages. They are designed to welcome people in, to draw them in. They're warm places. They're safe places. They're invested in the community they serve. You guys talked about your aunt who drove the bookmobile. I mean, talk about investment in community. That's time and energy and money that's put to get the books to the kids. So when you look at libraries and who is reading the books in them, it's really everyone. You think about the adults that come in for education classes, moms and dads looking for a good story to read to their little ones. You think of older adults who are coming in maybe for a book club or to enjoy coffee or tea together. It's really about everyone. Libraries are for everyone, and what they read there is everything. Libraries don't have an agenda. They are made to have books and materials to cover basically any topic of interest. That's what a lot of libraries pride themselves on, is providing materials for everyone in all walks of life, no matter what they're interested in. And when you look at what is sold in a bookstore or what may be advertised on Amazon, of course they're going to be looking at book reviews and things like that. But when you take it from a for-profit standpoint, it makes sense that they would have a business model. They would want to sell what they believe the public is interested in. And you can lose some voices. You can lose some authors when you suddenly narrow down what's available. And I feel like libraries don't do that. There, of course, someone is ordering the books and whatnot, but they don't have that bottom line. We need to sell this number of books to keep our doors open. We need to have this many people put this in their cart and pay for it.
Wow.
That was powerful, Stacey.
It really was. I mean, ditto. I can't even, I don't think I can add to it except to say that I've never met a librarian that didn't welcome me in and make me feel, hey, I can help you out with this, or I can give you ideas about that. And they're always full of ideas. Always.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we all need places of learning and opportunity, and access to libraries and the stories they hold, like Stacey was saying, provides a level playing ground for everybody. This is a really fast-moving conversation. Wow.
Yes.
This is our conclusion, though, of part 1 of our conversation with Melinda Long and Stacey Gardner. Make sure to listen in to part 2 next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the AfterwordPodcast.com and like us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, because it matters. And of course, as always, you are welcome at our table.